Good morning. My name is Kevin Callahan, and this is the Records Management Division's Fall 2025 Operations Training. In this training, we are going to review some of the general practices when storing records in agency, as well as transferring them over to the State Record Center. Just one reminder is that we have the PRC meeting, the Public Records Commission meeting, is on October 20th at 1 o'clock, and it will be at the Library and Archives Conference Center. If you have any questions about that, please contact your records analyst. So as we begin, let's talk a little bit about records format. And what is records format? When we talk about that, that is the manner in which the record is kept. So you have three main formats: paper, electronic, or film. And these are the main categories. Now, sometimes as we talk about it, film, what used to be film, video and pictures, now often falls under electronic. But depending upon your agency, you may still have, whether it's microfilm or old camera footage. These are things that X-rays that fall under the film category. So if you think about it, those are still in use, and there are some things you have to keep in mind. At a later time, we'll probably do a in-depth training on records formats. But for now, you have paper, electronic, and film. Paper, you know what that is. And then electronic can be stored in a variety of methods. It's preferably server, and that can be virtual servers. It can be on the state system. It can refer to the servers of a vendor that is doing work for the state, or also portable drives or disk. And the things to remember, whether it's paper, electronic, or film, each methodology has advantages and disadvantages, and we have to consider them. So one of the items to consider is when you store paper records. This used to be 90%, and then it's slowly changed of what records were in the paper format. Most things were in paper format, and that's switched now. You have 75, 80, 85% of records now really are digital, and it's continuing to change. But storing paper records, so what are the advantages? Well, it does not require any special technology to read or duplicate. You can read it with the naked eye, and if you need to make copies, you can use a copy. If you want to get back into really old school, you could have someone sit down and scribe and write down the information onto a new piece of paper. You can also lower the cost by storing the records offsite at the State Record Center, right? So paper is very familiar to people. It's easy to see, it's easy to read. You don't need anything. Disadvantages. Paper can be expensive to store, and also when you have to get it ready for whether it's records requests, court cases, any of those things, because it increases the need for physical space. And it actually can be heavy. If you put a lot of paper together, it actually affects weight loads on floors and such. Matter of fact, if you go back 40 years, even 20 years, we used to have those old 5-drawer file cabinets, very dense. They would go up and have whole walls filled with them. And they went about 2.5, 3 feet deep, but incredible amount of weight would be in there. And so you had to be careful about how they were on the weight loads of the building. Now, to meet building codes and standards and for safety reasons, we don't deal with that as much. We usually do 2 or 3 drawer file cabinets, lateral. They're and then you have a lot of space for them. So you're really only getting about 1 cubic foot per square foot when you look at it. So it's halved what it does. And when you look at that for space, and we pay for space, so there's always costs for the storage of records and in agency, and you're paying high prices, anywhere from $18 to $24 a square foot when you're renting office space. So that adds up if you're using it for paper. And that's why we say try to transfer as much as possible to the State Record Center. Right? The other things that come up with storing paper records is the deterioration in the original, and that can result in image degradation. Now, once again, I could go into a lot of detail and about, depending upon sunlight or heat, cooling, humidity, how densely packed you do, all of these things can be a multiplication factor in the speed of aging. So sometimes you can have, so for every 10 years, you could have a record aging 15 or even 17 or 20 years, as opposed to, so as you go longer term, it leads to degradation of the image. Electronic storage, on the other hand, has a lot of advantages. It reduces the need for physical space. It reduces that wear and tear. You don't have that level of image degradation. In addition, you can more easily search and retrieve information. Now, you have to, it shouldn't say you have to, but it greatly assists the better organized you have your electronic files as well, just like with paper records. The better organized you are, the better your indexing, your searching and retrieval will be, right? Also, electronic storage allows multiple access points. It helps on collaboration. You can have people all over the state, country, world able to access records as long as they have the right security and protocols and procedures. And you can create high quality copies anytime without the danger of image degradation, right? Now, there are some disadvantages. Once again, we get all this, but it requires hardware and software to access. You have to continuously monitor and update. You have to do computer updates. You have to do data migrations and conversions. You have to be able to keep ahead of your systems and software and hardware becoming obsolete, right? So there's metadata that's created, and the equipment is expensive to maintain. You have to do that. Also, you have to make sure you're following, with us, it's STS, standards and practices, so that you are staying on a universal accepted standard for the state that they can support and migrate. And then there's always the danger of modification or corruption for authentication, and of course also the threat of malware and really hostile action by there's ransomware, there's viruses, there's just plain destruction attempts by bad actors. So all of those things have to be considered with electronic storage. I'm still a big proponent of electronic storage, and there's a lot of those advantages, especially with disaster recovery, because it's not tied to one location and you have the multiple backups. And so the ability to get back into business and for business continuity, so you're prepared for your disasters, you're able to respond and reboot back up after them, is a huge advantage, right? And then what do you do when you have a ton of paper records or microfilm and you need to get those into digital format? Well, that's changing the format. And you can also actually create microfilm from digital records as well. There's machinery for all of these processes. The most common is to get it into digitization, right? So changing format is reformatting from one medium into another. And from paper into electronic is the most common plan and the most cost-effective solution over the long term. So before you implement a reformatting plan, you want to make sure you do a couple of key steps. One, you're going to be looking at, is there a cost benefit to this? So if you have records that are needing to be kept for long term, 20, 30, 50 years permanently, you can see a lot of return on investment from that. If you have records that only need to be kept for less than 10 years, well, at that point, is it really worth the cost to convert and change the format? No. So you look at these things, and then to see what your return on investment will be. Is it worth the price? If not, you let it die on the vine and you destroy the paper records when its retention period runs out. And then the other thing that you will do as you're looking at your digitization project is you'll look to see, do we have any copies? You go through the files and to see, purge out the extra copies or things that are no longer, that have already met the retention period, okay? And so you could look at that on what your options are. If it's short term though, you use the record center to let it die on the vine, age out, be destroyed, and not worry about converting it. So this is, talk to your analyst if you have any questions about digitization projects. I've done a lot of them over the years. I've talked with my team about it. We can assist you in identifying some of the key issues. I used to run an imaging lab that whole purpose was converting from paper to electronic. So I've done that a lot. We also did computer output to microfilm or microfiche over the years. So if you have any questions on that, contact your analyst and we can talk about it. So some of the basics though, digitization projects. First thing is check the RDA to verify the retention requirements of the record series. Then you evaluate your reference frequency. Do these records need to be accessed often from multiple locations? In other words, what is the added value that you're getting from digitizing it? Don't just digitize it to say we've digitized it. Look at what your benefits are. Remember, you always want to look to see what's our return on investment? What is the value added to this project, to the expense that we're going to go through, right? And then, based upon the research, determine what's the volume need to be converted. So for instance, you may have, say you have 100 cubic feet of records that have a 30-year retention period. Well, and you access it frequently. That sounds good. But what you do is then you look and say, okay, of this, how much is over 10 years? How much is under 10 years or 5 years? How often are we left on the retention period? So based upon are we going to really need to do the items that have less than 5 or 10 years in the retention period? And so you can start from what you have to keep the longest and work your way back. And that way, if you ever have to cut the funding for it, you have other expenses, you can look at that. So do the research ahead of time, determine what is your best and most cost-effective way of moving forward to do that. And then look at what's the best way to do it. In other words, how are you going to convert this? You potentially could do it in-house with your agency staff. This is often for day-forward processes, smaller backfile projects, right? Then you have the Department of General Services, Printing and Media Services. This is their specialty. They do scanning services for large projects. They have a lot of experience with this. Contact them, and they can give you complete project plans on costs, what the timeline. They're very experienced in this. That's going to be the first people that we'll send you to. as you talk with us, we'll say talk to them, see what their availability is, and what their recommendations are. And then you can also look at for very big projects, very high volume, central procurement. Once again, through Department of General Services, they went out and they have statewide contracts for specifically for very high volume projects. So that would be your other go-to people, and that saves you from having to do a costly RFP and everything, because they've done that hard work already on the front end for you. So you have those good options. We can talk to you about it, and then we'll recommend you over to DGS, General Services, with Printing and Media Services, has a lot of experience with this. And if they can't do it, or if it's they see the cost benefit, they'll recommend you to central procurement and for those contracts. All right. Excuse me. Let's talk about maintaining records. This is records in agency. We're assuming paper format. And you could also say film as well. Okay. So what are the advantages when you have records in agency? It's quick access, right? You're able to grab it. It's easily available, whether audit, litigation, records request, or just your daily business, right? The disadvantage is it increases the need for physical space, and the cost there is. The other thing is that it's not as collaborative, once again, as it is if it's electronic. Also, with more people working AWS and remote, you don't have as many people in the office who can access it as quickly. And of course, less people have in the office, you have to make sure that you're properly securing these records, okay? Keeping an eye on things. And also making sure that they are secured also from vermin or water, heat, humidity, those sort of things, the environmental conditions. So there are those disadvantages for storing it in agency. And that's where the State Records Center comes in. We can help you with that. These are also the things that we go over when we do the assessment, where we come out and work with the agencies to take a look at how much do you have in paper format, where it is, how is it going on. But here's a couple of things that you can look at as a quick way as you're determining, should this be on-site storage or not? Are you referring to this record series often, more than once a month? That's something that's active, should be kept in the office close to where they'll be accessed. Is it something that your customer, your clients, the citizens are coming in to that you have to be able to utilize this for them, right? Now, consider, as I mentioned, the environmental and security concerns when you're looking for the storage site within your facility. In the last 30 years, working in this field, one of the things that I came across was that architects often put big records, file rooms and record storage areas in the basement. I understand. There's not the concern about weight load. You're not taking up prime real estate with shelves of paper, all of those reasons. Unfortunately, there was also this tendency to put plumbing right above those areas, or to have it right next to boiler rooms and some things like that, workshops, other things that are in the basement. So you always want to look for potential fire hazards, flood hazards, all of those things. Particularly, you want to watch out for outgoing water pipes above your records area. Now, sometimes we don't have a choice, in which case you want to be able to have record storage items that you can have at least shielded, closed, closable file cabinets and such, to see what you can do, or use box storage to provide that extra layer of protection of the paper records in case there is a water leak. So some of the things that we put down here, temperature and humidity range, you're looking at, you don't want it too dry nor too humid. Around 40% is the ideal, plus or minus a little bit. you have to have it protected against fire. You need smoke detectors, sprinklers, fire extinguishers nearby, and you want to keep it free of vermin and insects, obvious reasons. And sometimes we have storage facilities around the state. This has been reduced, but it's put into, we need this in this less used building on our facilities campus. And sometimes those less used older buildings have issues with the roof or with, more access for insects and vermin, and that can be a problem. And of course, as much as possible, can never predict everything, and there's just some areas we have to operate in, and that can be prone to floods or other natural disasters. So we want to be careful, though, and aware. All right, security. Secure facility, locked, controlled access for personnel, and also clear procedures for storing, retrieving, utilizing, and refiling records. In other words, we have records that are confidential or sensitive. You want to have them in a locked cabinet or something, and where the keys are not just hanging out there. Right? File rooms need to be secured. And with some things, you even needed to have logbooks on entering and exiting, depending upon the nature of the records that you have. Everything from medical records, law enforcement, investigatory records, there is going to be different levels of security, but be aware of what you need. You have to protect the personal information of the citizens and your clients, right? And then also, if it's historic or essential records, things that are permanent, you want to talk to us about it. And we'll go over the storage conditions. This is where you're avoiding having them directly exposed to sunlight, prone to, you don't want them right at ground level in case there is a flood. You want to have them higher up. You want to be able to protect items from potential damage. And when you have microfilm, various films, doesn't matter. You need to take in the temperature and humidity conditions even more, and the exposure to sunlight. And we can talk with you. If you have that, talk to your analyst. We can go over those for you. So moving towards offsite storage. Records that have not yet reached the end of their retention period, but are not rarely referenced, are the ideal candidates. Right? So you want to transfer records to the State Record Center once it's no longer being as often used. And a lot of times this is after its active year. So you do that, and the cost per square foot is anywhere from 1/3 to 1/4 of what it would be if you're storing it in the prime real estate of your agency area. Okay, so you will do that, you save the state money, and you free up your area from that extra volume of paper records. All right. The other thing is to maintain the records there. The ownership is maintained by the agency. The Records Management Division does not have ownership or guardianship. We are not allowed to turn things over for records requests or anything. That has to go through the agency. So anytime we do get any sort of inquiry, whether it's from audit, the attorneys, or public records requests, we always refer that back to the owning agency, because your agency is still the owner and guardian of all records stored at the State Record Center. So some of this we're going to go through now, going to go through in an expedited fashion these slides, because the reason why we have them is so you have the step-by-step process. Otherwise, this would be a very, very long training if I go too deep into the weeds on this. We have a new vendor. Iron Mountain took over this year as the State Record Center. A couple of things to consider as you're storing with Iron Mountain. Please make sure when you're going through and you're getting to there that you consider what you're entering and how you're entering it. In other words, IAM Connect is a new software system. You have to make sure when you're choosing for delivery that you're choosing the right carrier. It's usually almost always going to be the state. Our team is going to do it. It's not going to be a third party or Iron Mountain. It's going to be the records management team. So review things when you go over it. Make sure you share information with members of your team, especially for agencies that have a wide dispersal of records across the state, and so you're using people in various offices, that they are fully aware of how important all of these things are. Okay, because if you don't follow it, you could have extra charges. The other thing to remember is you have to have people on site. If you request a record for delivery and it's going to be delivered that next day, someone has to be in the office, and they have to be there from 8 to 5. Remember, we are delivering records to multiple agencies every day. We cannot set a time specifically for you or such. So your agency, we don't know until that day everything that's come in. We also have special projects planned for large items, so volumes to be delivered. So you have to be prepared for this. Otherwise, you could have additional charges. So the first thing is when you're preparing records for transfers, you have to know the RDA. So look at what they are, because you're going to have to fill in all of this information in IAM Connect in the so you have that to reference and look up. So records must be listed on an approved RDA with a finite disposal date to be eligible for transfer and storage to the State Record Center. If it's permanent, it will be in there as permanent, but it has to have an RDA. So it will not have a disposal date, but we'll have the start date and we'll have the RDA in there with the code that it's permanent, right? And then you're going to look and you're going to determine the volume of records, right? And so you have to use the standard record storage box unless it's something unusual like blueprints or something that is beyond that. But you want to use that basically the 15 by 13 by 10.5 inch box, okay? And so you measure and make sure you have enough boxes. You don't want to completely overfill a box. Want to have it full, but not jam-packed to where it's bursting. And we'll show a picture in a little bit about that. So you make sure you order boxes, right? You're not going to order them from the State Record Center. We have boxes on there. That's really for if something breaks open while it's there. There's a charge for that to rebox it. But the state has a much less expensive option on through Office Depot at this time, but we'll always have an option through procurement. So the standard size box is 15 by 13 by 10.5. It has double walls and bottoms so it can be safely stacked in reviews. And those are your standard storage boxes. Now, if you have items that are permanent or of stuff that's archival value, we can reference and you can get things that are boxes that are made of acid-free cardboard. And you can actually have acid-free cardboard, acid-free folders, acid-free pens to mark them. Talk to your analyst, we can get that information for you, right? But you're going to use the standard box. So have enough boxes on hand, and then you pack the boxes. And as you can see from the picture, That's a full box, right? If you fill it up, it'll be less than 30 pounds. Most of the time, they're around 20 pounds when you do that. Carefully pack the boxes so that the files, you can view the tabs to know which is in there, and then that you have a little bit of room to be able to remove the folders and such. You don't want it packed in so snug that you have to have a pair of pliers to be able to pull that first file folder out. Right? Put them in neatly in. Try to use whatever order you'd be looking it up. Remember that it's not going to necessarily be you yourself who will, if this is ordered for to get a file out to view, right? Someone else is going to have to be able to find the files in there. So you want to have them in a manner that makes sense. Don't just toss stuff into a box, right? That way things get damaged, they shift around, but also it's the more organized you are, the better it is for everyone. And the other thing is, remember, you cannot just use old copy paper boxes for storage or anything like that. Use the standard storage, right? And keep things visible for access. Okay. Now, this is where we're going to get a little bit more into the IM Connect. I'm not going to go into huge detail on it. We do have a training from Iron Mountain's personnel on how to use IM Connect. But a couple of things to go over are key. So you have to enter into IM Connect the new box information, right? And that's you're doing records management pickups, add records, add box, right? So you're selecting the standard carton. Do not select any other size without pre-approval from Records Management Division. In other words, talk to Sharon. You have to complete all fields marked with the red asterisk. We have a standard customer number, 754SL, right? That is what's going to come up. That has to be in there, and you're going to have to write that on the label that you get. And there are specific box labels for Iron Mountain that have to be ordered, and there's a charge for them. So order what you need, but don't over order. Okay? So when you go through this, you'll now know what the SKP barcode is. That's the number from the Iron Mountain label. You'll enter in the major description. RDA title is very helpful for that. That way it helps people look at it. Minor description, recommend that you utilize something like the division name or the department code for the division. For instance, internally within my group, we use records management. Our number is 30513 that we use. Okay, your from date. This is, and the to date. This represents the dates of the content of the box. So if I had files that were for 2025 and it's January to December, I would enter in 1/1/25, 2025 to 12/31/2025. This is very important because this is the end date is what, the retention code sets a set amount of time, the RDA number. We have that in there. And so if it's a 5-year retention period, it'll go off of 5 years from 12/31/2025 is the end date. Boom, that's when it will then be flagged for potential destruction. Okay. The box department from the drop down, which is specific to your agency. Okay. And then the long description is the details of your box contents. Think of it this way. This is what you want to have if you were having to look this up in a manner that would make sense. So if you have case number or case names, you would put that in there. Think of it as if I had to look this up and find this box later, or someone who took, 10 years from now, how would they find it? What would be the easiest way? What would be the easiest way to search? Use that. Very often might be something like 2015 case files, A to B, right? At least that lets them know, okay, in 2015, these are the names that start with A and go up to B. And then the next box might be C to F or G to whatever. So you go through and you do that in a way that makes sense for someone to look up in a manner that makes sense to your workflow for your agency. And then the record code is the RDA, select from the dropdown. And this, once again, is the destruction eligibility period is calculated from that number that's entered. Right. Label boxes with the Iron Mountain barcode. Okay. Apply that label to the lower right side, right, on the handle side of the box. And there's going to be a picture in a moment. The next slide. Approximately 1 inch from the bottom and 1 inch from the side. If there is a pre-existing label, place it just above that label. You must put the state ID on each of those labels. That's the 754SL. And I recommend using a ballpoint pen. We've tried a couple of things. You can use a felt marker, but if it's not completely dry, there's a tendency for you can accidentally smear it. That's why I recommend a ballpoint pen. And what this is an extra level of security and tracking ability. All right, so you select records management, you order supplies. That's how you get the labels. Go through there. Once again, a lot of this stuff is in our full Iron Mountain Connect training. Order instructions. Add cell phones, specific floor or suite or contact person, if that's in there, in case. In other words, what happens if you're called away or something and the driver needs to get a hold of you, right? Remember, Tommy and Barry do the deliveries for records management divisions. They work for the state. They work for the records management division. They do almost all of these pickups and deliveries. We do have the ability to have Iron Mountain to do that. There's a cost savings to utilizing our team. And so we try to do that. That's a benefit for the state. But there are times where it actually makes more sense, especially for very large orders, for Iron Mountain to do it. Or sometimes if we have so much going on, we may have to use Iron Mountain. But whenever possible, Tommy Avila and Barry Kelly, they work for the Records Management Division, and they're there. They'll be the ones usually calling and in case there's an issue. But you have to add that order instructions just in case, so that way you have it, and then you place your order complete. This is the picture of the box label. Now, sometimes, if that's also where the old vendor labels used to be. So you would put it right above that. Okay. But you're trying to get as close to that particular spot as possible. So arrange for pickup, add the new boxes to IM Connect, assemble boxes in a location that is easily accessible for our team to pick up, and that does not cause a fire hazard or a trip hazard for your team and daily operations, especially if you're setting up a large amount. It may take us a little while to get there. If it takes a few days, you don't want people tripping on it. So once you have items in the State Record Center, all the requests, you would do a retrieval request. All of those are in the next day delivery, unless we've set something up ahead of time. Once again, that's where you are contacting Sharon to coordinate that. Right there, all the requests are next day. there is a strict deadline of 11 a.m. for next day deliveries. Any orders delivered as submitted after 11 a.m. will be delivered in 2 business days. Okay. This is not something we can adjust. We're working under very strict guidelines on this. So all of these things you want to make sure that you have in and that your team knows that, right? Before entering any requests over 30 boxes, contact Sharon Groves with records management, all right? Also, contact Sharon for any requests outside the immediate Nashville area. This type of request is not next day delivery and must be scheduled. Right? If you have an emergency request, so say commissioner's office, or you have a sudden court item that comes up and you have to have it next day and it's 2 o'clock in the afternoon, or even same day, you would have to put in an emergency request and to see if we could get it done in the amount of time you need. But that would be in a records emergency request, and we would have to contact the facility directly. Eventually, there will be doing the permanent removal option, but right now we are not doing that. We are not permanently removing items from there because we're in the middle of a transfer, and so we're having to track and confirm everything. Now, anyone who's been listening to me over the last dozen years knows that I am a big fan of using spreadsheets to track what you're doing. Everything that you're doing, I recommend, yes, you're uploading items into IM Connect. Create spreadsheets, keep these spreadsheets, use them just in case. That way, we can never anticipate when there may be, say their Iron Mountain's system is down and you need to start looking something up. Utilize that, okay? You then have your own spreadsheets to kind of track and be able to say, okay, this is what I need. And that way you also know what you have. So when there's a request and you are able to know where in your agency boxes are at any time. There have been times over the years that we've gotten a call from someone from an agency and they're asking us like, hey, do you know where this box is? And we need it. And then we reply back and go, oh, okay, yeah, that actually was ordered in 2019. It's been out at your agency for the last 3 years, something like that. And they go, okay, but do you know where it is in my agency? We have no way of knowing that. We don't. That's not something tracked at this level. But if you have your own spreadsheet, you can then track things like this and know that, hey, this is it was ordered on this date in 2019 and it's at this division. Okay. So this is some of the information I suggest that you do. It helps. Okay. Now the other thing is, as we're talking about tracking and reporting right now, as we're in the middle of a transition, if you look and you see and you're not able to find one of your boxes in IM Connect, contact Sharon. It means it hasn't been transferred yet to Iron Mountain from our previous vendor. And so it may be in the process. It doesn't mean that it's not available. We can potentially get it. We're trying to limit that right now only for items that are needed for daily operations, court, records requests, audit, things like that. But we can get it if you need it. And so if you don't see it in Iron Mountain Connect, contact Sharon and she can do the search and potentially get it from our previous vendor and see where it's at. And it may be on its way over to Iron Mountain. We're in a process. We anticipate in early 2027 being completely done, but we're moving thousands of boxes from between vendors right now. So, and that process is going to continue. It's going smoothly, just takes a while. Remember, the state had 200,000 cubic feet of records that have to be moved. That takes a while. All right. So when records management division, when we're contacted by a records coordinator or someone else within that agency that's not necessarily the records officer, one of the things that we do is we make sure we copy the records officer on our reply. We will bring them back in to the discussion to make sure that way the records officer is aware if there's a problem, that they'll know, then you know the appropriate answer as the records officer. Because you may have, especially with larger agency, there might be other coordinators that have that same question. And so this way, everything's consistent information and prevents contradictions, at least reduces that chance. The state is a large organization, and some of the agencies are very large. So by doing this, our goal is to reduce any conflicting information or processes, so everyone's on the same page, right? If you need to review boxes at the State Record Center, it is available. Once again, you have to contact Sharon Groves because everything has to be all this has to be pre-approved. There's a charge, and there's boxes have to be viewed and reshelved. So there's a whole process that we can go over with you. The same thing with special projects, right? Anything more than 100 boxes, locations outside of Nashville or multiple sites, it requires additional planning. And really, if you have more than 30 boxes, if you have new boxes right now during this transition period, contact Sharon if you have to coordinate that. Because with new boxes right now, we want to make sure we're coordinating that with the vendor so that they don't think that there should be a previous Iron Mountain or previous vendor information, that this is brand new coming into Iron Mountain. The other thing is, if you have boxes at your agency from our previous vendor, right? We need to get those over as soon as possible. We need to get that moved over so that it can have an Iron Mountain label applied to it and that it's there. So if your agency is done with them, make sure we get that over as soon as possible. And really, we want to do that in the next year. And it might be that you might end up having it sent back to you if you need that, or if it can't be right now because it's involved in, say, litigation or something in that you cannot send it over to Iron Mountain. Talk to Sharon so we can make appropriate arrangements to get a Iron Mountain label to that specific box. So one of the themes today is call Sharon and work with her on some of these specific items. University of Tennessee, we do still have a contract with UT Knoxville for records management services. If you have questions about that, and for the details, contact Sharon on that. Now, Iron Mountain has record centers in Nashville, Memphis, Chattanooga, and Knoxville. And these are full service locations. Like I said, we can do everything at those. But we also have an existing contract and records stored with the University of T. It's a great partnership. So you can let us know if you have any questions about that. Now, destruction. Okay. So destruction is always controlled by the criteria described in the records disposition authorization. All right. Records stored at the State Record Center will be shredded for a fee. Okay, and if you need that, we do not do any destruction of records that are not stored at the State Record Center. If it's not stored with Iron Mountain, it is not going to be destroyed by them. So if you have records that have only been at your agency, have never been stored at the State Record Center, then contact the Department of General Services Procurement Division for the state contract on shredding. They handle that. They have all the information and they can do that. Now, during this transition period, we are not doing destruction because we have to confirm that everything's been transferred over. There's processes we're going through. But this is in general. For that, once we're done with this process, we will be able to do destruction once again. All right. Now, when you're destroying items in your agency, and we always recommend shredding everything. You have to destroy anything with confidential information or sensitive information. You need to shred that. I recommend shredding everything. Right, that's our professional recommendation. Shred all your records. It's the way to be sure that nothing slips through. So that's the recommendation. Shred everything. And anything for your office, state has a contract for that. It's a statewide contract, and they can give you the information. Now, destruction certificates. This is where you're going to fill this out for things that you are destroying, okay? And that's in the agency. It's online. We have that. We go through that a little bit in the records officer training. But here's a listing for you to go over that. It's your responsibility to review the agency's records and determine which records are due for destruction. And that's whether it's in your agency or at the State Record Center. Records Management Division nor the vendor, neither one will destroy anything without instructions and sign off by the agency. Okay, records destroyed in the agency require submitting a certificate of records destruction, which is available on our website. And you can talk to your agency analyst for that, right? If anything is destroyed at the State Record Center, you will get a certificate of records destruction after it is completed, right? And remember, non-records, extra copies, things like that don't have to be documented on a CRD. Working papers and temporary records, I recommend that you do, though, recommend those that record those on a certificate of records destruction. And what that does is it documents the destruction date, record series, RDA number, date range, as well as the volume and the destruction method. And this provides a clear point of reference in case you're ever asked, hey, where are these records? When did you destroy them? All of those questions. And records management, you submit that in. We have the database, the data to then back up what has been destroyed to, in case there's ever a question about your compliance. Okay. Now, keep your information on what's being destroyed in agency, your copies of the certificates of records destruction. If you have any questions, there's contact information. That's Barry and Tommy. That's their numbers in case you need to contact them. Have that ready, especially if you're ordering records either for pickup or drop off, retrieval. And on all of these things, if you have any questions, if you're not sure, call Sharon, email her, check with her first. I know this was a long training. We went over a lot. So if you have any questions, please contact us so that we can go over the answers for you and make sure that you are fully aware of the responsibilities. If you have any other questions, let us know. I hope everyone has a great rest of the day and a nice fall and winter.